I didn't even make it through the door before my sister fired the first shot. "She has no right to be here," Vanessa hissed, loud enough for everyone in the foyer to hear. Her voice sliced through the quiet hum of murmured greetings and clinking teacups like a blade. Dad made it perfectly clear she was dead to him. I paused with one hand still on the brass door handle, the other clutching Ivy's smaller fingers in mine. My daughter glanced up, her brows drawn tight, sensing the tension even before understanding the words. "Ignore it," I whispered, squeezing her hand. I willed my feet to move forward, though everything in me screamed to run back down the steps, to the safety of the world I'd built for us, far from this house, this family. Vanessa stood like a gatekeeper just inside the living room, dressed in sleek black silk, hair twisted into a severe bun that practically glittered with control. Her husband, Dylan, sat beside her on the tufted settee, avoiding my eyes but smirking faintly, like he'd been handed a script he already enjoyed. Around the room, I saw familiar faces. Uncle Gerald and his wife Judith by the fireplace, the Harrisons from next door sipping espresso in the corner, and a few cousins I hadn't seen since our high school graduation. All of them turned to look at me with the same vacant expression, as if they weren't quite sure whether to say hello or call security. Ivy and I found 2 empty chairs tucked in the farthest corner of the room, near the window that overlooked the withering rose garden. The same garden I once spent hours tending as a teenager, just to avoid the cold inside the house. Mr. Chandler, my father's longtime attorney, stood by the grand piano with a thick manila folder in his hands. He looked exactly as I remembered him, tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a patience that could outlast stone. He nodded at me, faintly, not warm, but not cruel, neutral. That was the best anyone offered me in this house. "This won't take long," Vanessa said, too cheerfully. Dad was nothing if not efficient. I kept my eyes on Ivy, who swung her legs softly, hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore the black dress we picked out together yesterday. She had insisted on brushing my hair that morning, saying, "You have to look strong, Mom, like you don't care what they think." But I did care, more than I should have. I hadn't stepped into this house in nearly 9 years, not since the day I left with 2 suitcases, a 2-year-old Ivy asleep in my arms, and nothing else but the resolve to stop playing the family puppet. That day, my father hadn't come to the door. He sent Vanessa instead, who stared down at me and said, "He has nothing to say to you." I had driven away with Ivy in the back seat, tears streaming down my cheeks, as I told myself that love shouldn't have to be earned by pain. So why had I come back now? Because 3 days after the funeral, I received an envelope. No return address. Just my name and the address of the Monroe estate printed in Mr. Chandler's formal, serif typeface. No note. Just the date and time of the will reading. I almost threw it away. I told myself it was a mistake. But Ivy saw it and said, "Maybe there's something you should hear." Maybe. Maybe I wanted to know if he'd thought of me at all in the end. If there was a letter, a line, a photo. Something that said, "I saw you." But now, seated in this room, I could already feel the cracks forming under my chair. Uncle Gerald leaned toward Judith and whispered something with a grin. She chuckled and covered her mouth like they were exchanging scandalous gossip. Mr. Chandler cleared his throat. "Thank you all for being here. I know emotions are still raw, and I will do my best to proceed respectfully and efficiently. This is the official reading of Benjamin Monroe's final will, dated 7 months prior to his passing." He opened the folder and began reading the usual legal jargon. Being of sound mind, designated beneficiaries. This document supersedes all previous versions. I tuned most of it out. I already knew what was coming. I'd seen the way Vanessa smiled when she walked past me, like she'd already won, like she knew. Mr. Chandler's voice dropped slightly as he began reading the names. "To my daughter Vanessa Monroe, I leave the Monroe estate, including all contents therein, with full rights of ownership and management." Vanessa didn't move. Her lips twitched once, but her expression remained composed. Practiced. She probably rehearsed this moment in the mirror. To my brother, Gerald Monroe, I leave the lakeside property in Camden and 40% of the remaining business equity in Monroe Textiles. Gerald smiled so widely it almost cracked his face. To my nephews Caleb and Sean, I leave the investment portfolios outlined in Appendix D, as well as the vintage car collection. Whispers, shifting chairs, a murmur of satisfaction. Then came the words I knew would cut deeper than any knife. And to my daughter, Lena Hartley. My breath caught. Mr. Chandler glanced up for the briefest moment. I leave no part of this estate. As previously declared in the codicil, she has forfeited any claim by her own volition. There it was. The knife. Vanessa let out a sharp breath that sounded like a laugh. Told you, she said to Dylan. Uncle Gerald shook his head with a mock sigh. Some people just write themselves out of the story. No one looked at me. No one had to. Ivy sat perfectly still beside me. I didn't look at her yet. I couldn't. If I did, I'd break. Instead, I stared at the floor, willing my face to stay neutral. Not angry, not hurt, nothing. That was always the trick. Be invisible, be unbreakable. I should have known. I did know. But some part of me, the child still inside my bones, had hoped for something different. And then Ivy moved. She stood up quietly, brushed down the front of her dress, and walked to the end of the table. Excuse me, she said, her voice soft but piercing. Everyone turned. Vanessa looked down her nose, confused. Ivy, this is not the time. You forgot the message he left, Ivy said. The room fell still. What message? Mr. Chandler asked. Ivy reached into her small shoulder bag and pulled out a folded white envelope. On the front, for Mr. Chandler, only if it gets ugly. He gave it to me, she said simply. He told me to wait, just in case. My heart slammed in my chest. Mr. Chandler took the envelope, his fingers trembling slightly. Vanessa stood up. This is absurd. What even is that? Some child's fantasy? But Mr. Chandler had already opened it. Inside, a USB drive and a short, handwritten note. His face changed as he read. Then he looked up. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice suddenly solemn, we have a supplemental message recorded by Mr. Monroe to be played under specific circumstances. I believe those circumstances have been met. He walked to the laptop resting on the piano bench, inserted the drive, and pressed play. The screen flickered. And there he was, my father, wearing the navy sweater I'd bought him years ago, looking into the camera. And then he said the two words I never expected to hear again. Hi, Lena. They didn't even wait for the lawyer to speak. She'll get nothing. Dad hated her. That's what my sister Vanessa said the moment I stepped into the room. No greeting, no eye contact, just that sharp, cutting sentence, loud enough for everyone to hear, like she wanted it to echo off the cherry-paneled walls of the estate office. I felt the words land in my chest like a punch. My grip on Ivy's hand tightened, her small fingers curled around mine, warm and trembling. I forced a thin, shaky smile down at her, but she knew. She always knew. I hadn't even taken a seat yet, but the message was clear. I wasn't welcome. I wasn't family. I was a loose end they were here to snip clean. Vanessa sat at the head of the table, perfectly poised in a gray pantsuit, her dark hair scraped into the severe bun she favored when she wanted to feel superior. Her lipstick was the same blood red she wore to every formal family event. War paint. Then came the voice I dreaded even more. Gerald, my uncle, my father's older brother. He let out a dry laugh as he leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head, that smug smirk of his spreading like oil. She's not even smart enough to raise a real kid, Gerald muttered. Ivy's just as pathetic as her mother. My heart cracked in half. Ivy flinched. A beat passed before he leaned forward, sneering directly at her. You know what they say, right? Rotten trees don't grow good fruit. The words hit me like a slap. Ivy's lower lip trembled. My 9-year-old daughter, made of sunshine and song, trying to disappear under the weight of cruelty she didn't deserve. "Don't you talk to her," I said, my voice a whisper, sharp and trembling. Gerald just scoffed and leaned back again like he hadn't just gutted a child in front of a room full of silent, complicit adults. I led Ivy to the farthest chair, away from the wolves. The seat creaked under me as I sat. Ivy climbed up beside me, her legs dangling, her hands folded in her lap. Vanessa turned toward me with that familiar venom-laced smile. "You know this is pointless, right?" she said. "Dad rewrote the will, cut you out completely, said you were dead to him." I didn't reply. I couldn't. My throat had gone dry. I just nodded, once, like I understood. But inside I was asking myself the question I'd asked for 10 years. Why did I ever come back? Then I remembered Ivy's words that morning. "Maybe there's something you need to hear, Mom." The only reason I came. The room smelled like dust and cologne and too much old grief. The windows were shut, the drapes heavy. It felt more like a crypt than a reading room. I recognized a few of the faces around the table, distant cousins, old family friends, people who had once ruffled my hair and now wouldn't meet my gaze. Then the door opened. Mr. Chandler, our family's longtime attorney, stepped in. He looked exactly the same. Neatly pressed suit, tired eyes, a voice like paper. He carried a thick leather folder. "Thank you all for coming," he said. And so it began. He opened the will and began to read. It started as they always do. Declarations, estate definitions, legal language. I heard my name once, in the list of surviving heirs. But that was all. "To my daughter Vanessa," he read, "I leave the primary residence and all its contents." Vanessa's face didn't change, but I could feel the wave of satisfaction rolling off her. "To my brother Gerald, the lake property and remaining shares in Monroe Hardware." Gerald smirked, chewing a toothpick like he'd just won a poker hand. "To my nephew Mark, the vintage car collection." Mark, who once convinced me to hide under the porch during hide and seek and then never came back. That Mark. And then, and as previously declared, my daughter Lena will not receive a portion of this estate. Silence. Then a quiet scoff from Vanessa. "Told you," she muttered. Gerald leaned forward. "Takes a special kind of person to walk away from her own father." Their words cut deeper than I expected, deeper than I wanted to admit. I looked down at the grain of the table, trying to ground myself. And then Ivy, my daughter, shifted. She sat up straighter. "Let go of my hand." "You forgot something," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a bell. Everyone turned. Ivy reached into her small backpack and pulled out a white envelope, slightly crumpled, my name on the front. But beneath it, unmistakable in capital letters, "For Mr. Chandler only, if it gets ugly." My heart stopped. Where did you—" I began. Ivy looked at me. Calm, certain. "Grandpa gave it to me," she said. "Told me to keep it safe." Mr. Chandler stepped forward slowly. "May I?" Ivy handed it over. The room had gone silent. Mr. Chandler opened the envelope. Inside was a small USB drive and a handwritten note. His eyes scanned it. Then, for the first time, his expression cracked. "There is a supplemental video," he said, "from Mr. Monroe. It was recorded before the final revision of this will. Per his instructions, if the reading became contentious, I am to play it." Vanessa stood. "This is ridiculous. My father never—" "It is authenticated," Mr. Chandler said firmly, "and legally admissible." He walked to the laptop on the side table, inserted the USB. The screen lit up, and everything changed. The screen flickered. And there he was, my father, Benjamin Monroe. Older, thinner than I remembered. Seated at his desk, a bookshelf behind him stacked with legal volumes and old family photos, including one of all of us, back when I still fit in that frame. He wore the navy sweater I gave him years ago, the one he never acknowledged receiving. His face wasn't stern like I remembered. It was tired, and something else, uncertain. "Hi, Lena," he said. Not Lena Marie, not my daughter, just Lena. "If you're watching this, I'm gone, and I'm guessing the reading didn't go peacefully." He let out a dry chuckle. No one in the room moved. Gerald's fingers were clenched, white-knuckled. Vanessa had gone completely still, her face blank. "I know what they think of you," he continued. "Hell, I know what I said about you. I believed everything they fed me, that you were selfish, dramatic, that you ran because you couldn't handle pressure." He paused. "But I was wrong." My breath caught. My ears rang. "You didn't run. You fought. You left a marriage that was breaking you in half. You tried to tell me, but I didn't listen. I didn't ask. I shut the door." He swallowed. "Ivy came to see me once. Just her." I felt the world shift beneath me. "It was months ago. She showed up with your neighbor, Sandra, I think her name was. Said she wanted to meet me, just for an hour. I almost didn't open the door." He smiled faintly. "But I did. And you know what she did? She handed me a tiny, pressed flower she'd picked from your garden, said it was from you. That even though you and I didn't talk, she thought I might still like something pretty from your world." Tears hit me fast and hard. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't try to explain. She just sat with me, told me about her drawings, her favorite books. And when I asked what she thought of you, she looked me in the eye and said, "My mom is the safest place I know." The air left my lungs. I realized then I hadn't just lost a daughter. I'd nearly lost the only chance to know the best parts of her, too. Vanessa whispered something under her breath. I didn't turn to look. I couldn't. Benjamin cleared his throat. "So I changed the will, quietly. I didn't tell anyone, because I knew how they'd react. I knew what they'd say." He reached off camera. When his hand returned, he held up a sealed envelope. "This letter and the revised documents go to Chandler if things get ugly. If you're watching this, then they did." Gerald scoffed aloud. Chandler, standing at the laptop, raised the printed documents. "Authenticated," he said. "Witnessed and signed." Benjamin continued, "I'm leaving the house to you and Ivy, along with my savings and the education fund. Not because I think it fixes everything, but because I want you to finally feel safe, too." He looked down, then up again, straight at the camera. "You carried more than I ever saw. You stood taller than I ever gave you credit for. You broke cycles I was too afraid to even name." A beat. "I'm proud of you." And then, "Tell Ivy. Thank you." The screen went black. No music, no fade, just silence. Chandler turned from the laptop. "These are the revised directives," he said, placing the envelope on the table. "All legally binding." Nobody said a word. Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair screeching backward. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands. "This isn't fair," she hissed. He was confused, manipulated. "By a child?" Chandler asked calmly. "She doesn't deserve this." "I do," I said quietly. "And so does Ivy." Gerald stared at me, his mouth tight. Then he stormed out without a word. One by one, the others followed. The room emptied, but for me, Chandler, and Ivy, who was still holding my hand, smiling softly. "You knew," I whispered. She nodded. "He said it was our secret mission. I didn't tell you because I wanted it to be his choice." I wrapped her in my arms, crying into her hair. That video wasn't just his apology. It was his truth. And now it was mine. 2 days later, I stood on the porch of the house I hadn't set foot in for over a decade. The Maplewood house. The place where I scraped my knees on the gravel path, hid under the stairwell during storms, and sat silently at dinner as a teenager, while my father read the newspaper instead of meeting my eyes. Only this time, the keys in my hand were mine. Chandler had called that morning. "The transfer is complete, Fitzhugh," he said. "You and Ivy officially own the property." My breath caught then, just as it did now. I turned the key in the lock and stepped inside. It was exactly the same, the mahogany trim, the grandfather clock that still ticked like a heartbeat in the front hall. Even the faint scent of my mother's rosewood potpourri lingered in the corners. For a moment, I was 9 years old again. "Whoa," Ivy whispered beside me. "It's huge." I managed a shaky smile. "It used to feel even bigger." She ran up the steps, calling out, "Can I pick my room?" I nodded, tears already pooling. But the house wasn't just filled with echoes. It was filled with eyes. Not 5 minutes later, a knock came at the door. I opened it to find Vanessa. Her lipstick was gone, her hair loose for the first time in years. She held a coffee in one hand, in the other a manila folder. "You don't belong here," she said. "Legally, I do." "That video? That wasn't Dad. That was some edited script. Chandler got to him, or you did." "Ivy did," she sneered. "So you're letting a 9-year-old rewrite history now?" "No," I said, stepping out onto the porch. "I'm letting the truth do that." She shoved the folder into my chest. "You won. Congratulations, but don't expect forgiveness." "From you? I never asked." She stared at me, unblinking, then turned and left. I didn't open the folder. I tossed it in the hallway drawer and let the shadows have it. That night, I found a photo album buried in the den. All of us at the beach. My mother in a sun hat, Benjamin in swim trunks, uncharacteristically smiling, and me, a child with scraped knees, laughing with a red kite in hand. Ivy peeked over my shoulder. "That's you?" I nodded. "You look happy." I was, for a moment. We stayed at the house for 2 nights. On the 3rd morning, I received a call. Gerald had filed a challenge to the will, citing undue influence. Chandler wasn't surprised. "It won't go far," he assured me, "but it will get noisy." And it did. Within hours, Gerald was on social media, claiming I had stolen the estate. Vanessa posted a blurry photo of Ivy with the caption, "This is what manipulation looks like when you use a child as a weapon." Ivy cried when she saw it. "I thought I helped," she said. "Now they hate us more." I held her tightly. "You didn't do anything wrong. People who break cycles get blamed by the ones still trapped in them." I wanted to ignore them. I really did. But their posts were spreading. Friends, neighbors, people we hadn't spoken to in years were picking sides based on a false narrative. So I posted a single image, a still from Benjamin's video. His face paused, mid-sentence, with the subtitle, "You carried more than I ever saw." Below it, I wrote, "My father didn't die confused. He died awakened. And he left behind something that mattered. The truth. Nothing else." Within minutes, support flooded in. Distant relatives messaged me. Neighbors apologized. One of Vanessa's old friends even shared the post with a caption that read, "This changes everything." That night, I opened every window in the house, let the ghosts out, and let ourselves in. The lawsuit was dismissed within 3 weeks. Gerald huffed through court hearings and filed multiple continuations, each one more desperate than the last. Vanessa submitted a statement so contradictory, the judge paused mid-reading to raise an eyebrow. In the end, Chandler didn't even need me to appear. I watched the final ruling come in from the kitchen counter, Ivy at my side, her fingers sticky from peach jam. She asked, "Does this mean it's really over?" "Legally, yes," I said. "Emotionally, we still have work to do." But the worst was behind us. The Maplewood house became ours, not just in ink, but in spirit. I repainted the kitchen walls a soft green. Ivy chose yellow for her bedroom, the color of her favorite raincoat. The guest room was converted into a studio, where I began taking portraits again. Not for clients, for healing. The first image I hung was one I took of Ivy that fall, sitting beneath the oak tree in the front yard. Leaves surrounded her like a crown, sunlight striking her hair with such fierce golden light it looked like flame. I titled it, Inheritance. I submitted it anonymously to a local art showcase. It won. They called it a raw expression of generational resilience. When Ivy saw the ribbon, she whispered, "That's for us, isn't it?" "Yes," I said. "It always was." The ghosts of the past still visited, sometimes, not in haunting ways, just memories. The creak of a stair I used to tiptoe over, a mug my mother used to drink from, the way the rain hit the attic window. One Sunday I found an old answering machine tucked behind the pantry. I plugged it in. Most of the messages were static, forgotten reminders, but one, dated 3 years before his death, came through. "Lena, it's your father. I don't know if this number still works. Just wanted to say I hope you're okay. Click. The message ended there. I didn't cry. I just sat with it. Let the silence finish the sentence. Vanessa never reached out again. Not directly. I saw her at a grocery store once, months later. She looked thinner, tired. Her eyes met mine across the produce aisle. She looked away. I didn't follow. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Gerald sent a letter. Typed, formal. He called me a manipulator, a disgrace, said he'd never forgive me for turning the old man against his own blood. I burned it in the fireplace. The flames didn't protest. A year passed, then another. Ivy grew tall, curious, brave. Her laugh filled the Maplewood house in ways no chandelier or oil painting ever had. I started hosting workshops in the den, photography for girls aged 10 to 14. We focused not on posing, but on perspective. How to tell a story without words. How to see yourself clearly, even if others refuse to. One of the girls asked once, "How do you know when a photo is good enough?" I said, "When it feels like a truth you never got to say out loud." On the 2nd anniversary of my father's passing, I hosted a small gathering. Not a memorial, a redefinition. We called it the Unspoken Exhibit. I displayed 15 portraits, Ivy beneath the tree, a self-portrait in the mirror of my old bedroom, a shot of my empty chair at the will reading, still and defiant. Each piece had no caption, only titles. Silenced, Return, Rewritten. The final photo was one Chandler had taken. Me and Ivy, standing at the gate of Maplewood, keys in hand. That one was called Home. When the visitors passed that frame, most of them paused. Some cried. One woman touched the edge of the display and whispered, "I wish I had done the same." I didn't need to ask what she meant. That night, Ivy fell asleep curled beside me on the sofa. The fire was low. The air smelled of cinnamon and old wood. I scrolled through my photos and landed on the one of her with the leaves again. Inheritance. Only this time, I saw it differently. Not just what she received, but what she would give. I pressed a kiss to her forehead and whispered, "You broke the cycle. Not me. You." Outside, snow had just begun to fall, the kind that blankets everything in silence. But inside the Maplewood house, there was light. And finally, peace.